Hi, Tim, and welcome to the Green New Perspective Spotlight.
Thank you, Dunja. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Can you introduce yourself and the company and tell me what inspired you to join LineVision?
LineVision is a rapidly growing climate tech company, and we're helping our utility partners around the world really lead the energy transition. And we provide technology to help enhance the grid, make it more flexible, more resilient, more secure, and unlock all the capacity that we have on the grid. And at LineVision, I'm the chief operating officer. So I lead our technology and operations teams, basically the group that is responsible for delivering all of our products and services to our customers. And I can tell you a little bit about how I got involved in this business and in sustainability in general. I'll start with a story. My family and I used to live in Japan. And in Japan, there's this concept of ikigai, and it translates into your reason for being. Some of your listeners may be familiar with this, but it's really about how do you derive a sense of purpose in your life and in your professional pursuits. And the idea is to look at the intersection of what you're passionate about, what skills you have, and what are important problems that need to be solved. And for me personally, I grew up here in the Rocky Mountains in Boulder, Colorado, and I've always been passionate about being outdoors and enjoying that with my family. I remember fishing with my father when I was growing up and passing that on to my kids, being outdoors and biking and skiing and all those things we love to do here. And the skills that I think I have to bring, I'm an engineer at heart. And I've spent my career in technology building hardware and software products to solve problems. And for me, that most important problem that we're working towards is addressing climate change through the clean energy transition. And I believe that's the most important work we can do. So about 3 years ago, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Tokyo. And since I am an engineer and I like data and numbers, I was literally drawing the Venn diagram of those things, the passion, the skills, and the important problems to solve, and really came to the grid as being the most impactful way to have a purpose behind the work that I do.
How has LineVision's technology been received in the market, and what impact do you believe it has in the energy sector?
Yeah, the grid is really at a crossroads, and there's a number of things that are influencing that. First and foremost, this era of flat load growth on the grid is over. So there had been several decades where we really weren't seeing much of an increase in demand. And now you look at trends like the electrification of transportation, you look at reshoring a lot of domestic manufacturing back into the US. And most importantly, you look at data center load. And all those things are contributing to a real increase in demand on the grid. So let's talk about data centers alone. Every time you do your search on ChatGPT or Gemini and you run that query, the results that you're getting were trained on models that run on GPUs in big data centers. And it's a couple of percent maybe of the total load today, but there's a lot of estimates. Latitude Media came up with one recently that show that by 2030, the load just due to data center demand could be 5 or to 9% of the total electricity consumption. So that's one thing that's happening is demand is rising. Another thing is you look in the news and extreme weather is happening all over, and the impact to the grid and the outages that people are experiencing are becoming more frequent and more severe. The last thing that's intersecting here is our urgent need to decarbonize the grid. The estimates are that we're going to need to double the size of the grid by 2035 and maybe triple it by 2050 to meet our climate commitments as a country, as a society. The bottleneck to that clean energy transition is really transmission. And when I say transmission, I'm talking about those high voltage power lines that form the backbone of our electrical grid. And that's really where LineVision is focused. And we can get into more details about exactly what we do. Essentially, the traditional approach to building out new transmission was infrastructure, more poles and wires. And this is great and we need, but that kind of large infrastructure can take decades to site and permit and build. And we're crazy if we think that we can meet that huge demand and meet the decarbonization through the traditional approach alone. And so at LineVision, what we represent is a different way to build grid capacity, not through poles and wires, but through sensors and advanced analytics to provide near real-time insight into how best to operate the grid and how to get the most out of the existing infrastructure that we have.
And can you share a success story or a study where your tech actually made the change?
So RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute, recently published a study on grid enhancing technologies on the PJM circuit. And that resulted in data that showed that grid enhancing technologies like the dynamic line ratings that LineVision provides could enable 6.6 gigawatts of additional new clean energy to access the grid by 2027. And the way we do that, and I mentioned dynamic line ratings, I think a lot of people that don't live and breathe the grid every day like we do at LineVision may be surprised at how we run the grid and how we rate those high voltage transmission lines, meaning how much current carrying capacity do we put down those lines. And today, that's really done through what's called a static line rating. It's often seasonal and it doesn't take into account the local weather conditions. It may be much cooler, wind may be blowing, and just a 1 meter per second wind across those lines can cool them enough to add about 40% additional capacity on those lines. And that's what we do at LineVision. We provide that dynamic line rating using sensor technology, using software, and using analytics.
And can we talk a bit about challenges? So what challenges do you have in this way and how did you overcome them, or are you overcoming them still?
There certainly are challenges and barriers to adoption. And since I'm an engineer at heart, maybe I'll focus on the technical challenges first. On the surface, what I just described seems pretty straightforward. This is basic physics. When you run more amperage down a line, that metal conductor is going to heat up and expand. That can be a bad thing if there's too much expansion of those lines and you have a clearance violation. Maybe that line hits a piece of vegetation and could spark a wildfire, for example. So it seems straightforward, but there's a lot of complex engineering that goes into this. We build IoT or Internet of Things devices that need to be really rugged, and they're going to be out there exposed to the elements. And then from that IoT device, we layer in advanced weather modeling forecast and algorithm development, machine learning applications and algorithms to really figure out what is the best line rating that is both safe and reliable for our utility customers and also maximizes the capacity that we have on the existing grid. So those are some of the technical challenges. We think more from the business perspective and industry adoption. Anytime you're selling to utilities, they are rightfully very cautious about deploying new technology to their critical infrastructure like the grid. They need to ensure that it's going to be safe and reliable and meet their IT and cybersecurity requirements. As a result, sometimes new technology can linger in what we affectionately refer to as pilot hell. There's the old adage that the utilities are often in a race to be second. And for us, finding those early innovators and working closely with those utilities has been really key. And I can talk to two specific examples. One is the AES Corporation, and they've been a great partner for us because they truly have an ambitious vision for what grid modernization looks like. So we recently completed a project with them where we installed 42 of our sensors on 5 lines and saw great results. We saw an average increase of 23% over the ambient adjusted ratings and 61% capacity increase over the static line ratings on their high voltage 345 kV lines. And this was done at a fraction of the cost of building new infrastructure or reconductoring existing lines. And AES published a great case study on this that I encourage all of the listeners to check out, and maybe we could post in the show notes. The other great partner that we've had is National Grid. And recently in Western New York, we worked with them to operationalize the largest now dynamic line rating application that is going into operations with National Grid. And this has been great because their customers can now benefit from more renewable energy flowing onto the grid, avoiding the curtailment costs that sometimes happen when there is transmission constraints.
Since this is a short conversation, can you tell me where our audience can get more information on LineVision and your tech?
Absolutely. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with LineVision as well. We have a great team of Line Visionaries, as we like to say, and are proud that we've been honored with awards like the Built-in 2024 Best Place to Work in Boston. So great culture and a great team. So connect with us on all the social channels and with me personally on LinkedIn.
Thank you for watching New Perspective Spotlight series. If you like our content, please consider subscribing to our social media channel and follow our podcast on your favorite streaming platform. Thanks.